Welcome to the Art and Void podcast, a sacred domain to elevate artists, mind, body, and spirit. We're artists committed to embracing our calling, guided by spirituality and self-development. I'm your host, Jesse Dvorak. If you're passionate about elevating yourself as an artist and connecting to a broader community of like-minded individuals, you're in the right place. Don't miss out on more fun, deep, sexy, and spiritual insights by subscribing to the newsletter at artandvoid.com. You can also follow along on YouTube and Instagram, where the handles everywhere are Art and Void. And today on the podcast, I'm excited to welcome Raisa Kabir, who's been providing enlightening lessons on her YouTube channel, The Pursuit of Wisdom. Raisa is a dedicated student of wisdom, sharing her journey and insights to help others seek the same, all while staying grounded in traditionalist values. Her approach offers a fresh perspective on how we can live meaningfully in the pursuit of knowledge and deeper understanding. Welcome, Raisa, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. That was a brilliant, lovely introduction. So thank you.
Absolutely. I'm not sure, that the YouTube algorithm works in mysterious ways, and your stuff came across my feed, and I started watching some videos. I really loved so much about your approach. You share these insights with a really great clarity, and also just your tenor is very grounded and energetically just sort of you're not like rushing through things. Some of the videos out there are just kind of like, rapid fire. I like that you were very present and you're kind of exploring these ideas. And recently you posted a video about sacred geometry, which is something that I've been into for years as well. And I just thought you did it in like 15 minutes in like such a wonderfully concise way. I feel like I would have had to create like 5 videos just to kind of wrap my head around this stuff, but just the way you articulated things was really wonderful. And one thing I'll just point out too is I'm actually inspired. I'm gonna be copying you. I'm gonna try this. I like you walking around in nature and just kind of giving a little a message while you're in nature. I thought that was quite wonderful. So I'm gonna give that a shot at some point.
Definitely, yeah. I recommend.
What started your journey into kind of broadening your perspective and your pursuit of different spiritual understandings? And because I know, you mentioned before you've come from an Abrahamic tradition, religious belief, and I've likewise. I grew up Christian, and so expanding beyond some of those things was quite a journey for me. So I'm just kind of curious about your background, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. So. It's quite a long-winded one, but essentially I grew up in an Islamic Muslim background. A part of learning and exploring Islam, especially when you're a child and you're growing up, you have so many questions that sometimes the adults can't answer. So I was exploring a lot, and it's inevitable that you explore a bit of Judaism and Christianity, especially from the Quran. So I was exposed to other religions. But then I grew up being fascinated by them. And then it was only within the past few years I started to explore perennial philosophy, which opened the door to understanding even more religions. And it was seeing connections, similarities that I thought was so important and imperative for so many people to understand, to promote unity and coexistence and respect amongst each other. And of course, many religions have their differences and it's important to acknowledge them. But for me, I really love this sense of belonging, again, coexisting all under, God's domain. And yeah, just a way of connecting with people. I thought it was a way. And what essentially led me to creating this YouTube channel, it was something I never would have imagined even within like the past 6 months. It was very spontaneous. It felt like a calling, so to speak. It's because the past 4 or 5 years on and off, I would watch a lot of manifestation content about changing your reality and spirituality, a lot of new age, new thought concepts. And I thought the teachings were great, but I felt like it was missing something very important, which I believe is the very nature of this reality, which is God's presence, a higher power, a connection to tradition. So I was seeing so many content kind of almost feeding into people's desires and being detached. And it was kind of like the opposite of what spirituality does try to achieve in terms of like some sort of union with higher power. And yeah, I just essentially saw this gap and I thought, well, I don't see a lot of content on perennialism as well and traditionalism. And I just thought, what if I could combine the two, manifestation and perennialism, and kind of unite these two groups of audiences to show that they share so much more in common than one could usually see. So yeah, a bit long-winded.
No, that's really beautiful. Was there did you grow up in I'm curious, where did you actually grow up? Because you have a lovely accent, at least where I'm coming from. I know it's probably not an accent for you, but
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of Birmingham in the UK. And I don't have the Birmingham accent. It's known to be atrocious, but I still don't understand what it is and if I have it. So I'll let the people decide that if they're familiar with the accent.
All right. Was there, the reason I asked, I'm just kind of curious. I think for a lot of people who, I'll speak for myself anyway, there's a lot of fear that kind of comes up when you're separating yourself with like a certain teaching and the community, especially the connection that we have to, what will my family think if I'm straying from the path of this specific structure, even of Christianity. And so there was, I've always been a little bit of a black sheep in some ways with that, in that regard, but still there's an internal just like, well, what does this mean? Does this mean I'm going to go to hell? Does this mean, God's going to send me off to my own like base desires if I'm like separating from this very specific, as I've learned, it's like a very small lens of Christianity that I grew up with. And it's like, oh, there's like so many other expressions of Christianity. That was kind of the first step for me. And then it's like, oh, a lot of these other expressions of Christianity have so much in common with these other faith systems. And it's kind of operating in a very similar sense. But I think what I'm just kind of curious about is more your personal journey. Has there been any sort of that just internal, well, I don't know how to deal with this because I'm so connected to these roots of my lineage or my family, whatever it might be?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, and topic to kind of discuss about as well, especially people that are they've been brought up in a certain way and it's breaking that generation of tradition, so to speak. This is quite an intense one. I think I've definitely grew up being the black sheep of my family. Quite rebellious, but in a questionable, curious way. It's never meant with any intention of harm or rudeness, so to speak. Right. It was just always trying to seek the truth and being logically minded and combining the spiritual intuition with logic reasoning. And I think, personally, I do have some discussions with my own mother where she's very deep-rooted in Islamic culture and upbringing and values. And she was initially very rigid against me exploring all these religions, but it's becoming more like she's adjusting, she's getting used to it. It hadn't been easy at the start, but it's definitely improving because at the end of the day, when you're approaching spirituality, you have to criticize how you are being as a person. So for me to, tackle situations where people might not agree with me with a place of hatred or fear, it's just not the right way to go about. So it was just consistent understanding, patience, and still operating from a place of love, not judging her, not judging myself. And it's like what you said in the sense of thinking, yeah, am I going to go to hell according to this scripture, according to this factor of Islam as well? I wouldn't like to say I've left it, but I wouldn't like to say I'm restricted to it. And I know a lot of people have their strong views with that, depending on what sect they're in. And even I didn't know about the other sects in Islam until like the past 3 years. I didn't know about like the Sufis. They're more like esoteric and spiritually inward, and many more off the top of my head. But so it was just a lot of exploration. But I think I'm a very big advocate for like self-forgiveness, continual forgiveness. When you have an intention, a pure intention, and only you can know it, and only God can know it too. You couldn't hide it from either parties, no matter how much you can try and hide it from other people. It's being in peace with knowing that it's from a good place and you are exploring. So yeah, I think that's my stance with this.
Yeah, thanks for opening up about that. I know that can feel a little dicey. But the fact that you started, it's one thing I think for a lot of people to make a shift in their personal life, but then you're deciding to put yourself out there into the world with YouTube videos and things like that. So that's another step of just sort of, okay, I'm going to really own this thing and communicate these things to other people, which is, like that can be just a step of bravery. And it's interesting because, similarly for me, we come obviously from very different backgrounds, which is interesting about this is that I was very questioning as well. I went to a Christian school, and I'd be kind of like the one kind of sticking, the poking the bear a little bit once in a while, but it was out of curiosity. Sometimes there was like a little bit of a punk rock attitude of just like I wanted to challenge people, but a lot of times it was just really like that doesn't make sense. And I for as long as I can remember, I had this sort of internal philosophy of like I don't need to be afraid of the truth, because wherever I find the truth, I'll find God. And so it's like I shouldn't be afraid of asking these questions to pursue this deeper understanding of how God is or how the world works, whatever it might be. And I think one of the things that kind of stuck out to me is you're seeing. Do you remember at a certain point in your life where you started seeing parallels or different things? You're like, oh, I'm curious, like why? How is that any different from what I believe? Or because you do that in some of your videos, and obviously with the perennial philosophy, it's like seeing the patterns and seeing the synchronicities in a lot of, or even maybe you can explain it better than I have. I've gotten a little bit into Huxley's philosophy, but I don't think I've gone quite as deeply as you have. Was that just sort of reading his work, or did you kind of incline to these things beforehand, and he was giving you a little more meat on the bone, so to speak?
So I definitely had an intuition that there were like truths within so many different places in the major religions, especially. And I think it was more so when I actually started it started with Christianity and Islam. I was comparing with them a lot within the past 2 years. And I was seeing so many similarities, and it was almost like a shock to me how these groups of people within these wonderful religions can have so much, I don't want to say hatred because that's quite a strong word, but so much opposition, so much almost like competition of who is right type of energy. And for me, I felt like maybe it's an empathetic vibe that I have within me naturally, but I just felt a little bit heartbroken for both of the teachings, because of course Islam does believe in Jesus Christ's teachings as well, and that was like the main cause for me to then explore. And growing up in South Asian culture, but Islamic South Asian culture as well, there is some stigma between Islam and Hinduism within the South Asian community. And I grew up being very exposed to that. And so I initially had perceptions of Hinduism that were not favorable, because of the environment I was raised in. And, it's something that I am ashamed of, but at the same time, it was who I was as a person, and I forgive myself for it. But I would like to think through the perennial philosophy, I'm learning about all these religions. And the more I've learned about Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and they're more, Huxley made a really good point. The Abrahamic religions are more time-based, and the latter religions are more eternity-based. So the concept of time is diluted, and there's no like revelation or a revolution to be had. It's like in a way more peaceful. And so it was just like picking apart things that I felt like there's definitely a divine truth in there. I couldn't see God detesting this, etc. And so it was just bringing it all together. And then it was when I found René Guénon, who is known to be a founding father of traditionalism. That was when I first knew about perennialism through this further subsect of perennialism. So traditionalism is like going in deeper. And then it led me to Huxley's perennial philosophy and just delving into this world of unity amongst all these religions. And I just found it so fascinating. There's so much that so many people don't know that we have in common. And it just blew my mind. And I just thought, why can't the world know this? But yeah, it was a lot to go through the past few years, a lot of self-discovery along with that, for sure.
And I think I would love to hear more about the traditional aspect of this, the depths there. I think sometimes, it's interesting because I would be told similar things of like, this is what the Hindus actually believe. It's like, well, have you actually sat down and talked with one? It's like, and actually, or gone to one of their ceremonies, have you actually experienced that and had that moment? Have you ever, I started doing kirtan last year, which is a chanting sort of a thing. And I had not known about that. It's been a huge blessing for me spiritually as I explored that. And so it's like, yeah, I can grow up and being told even all these different sects of Christianity or cults and whatever they are, but there's such a humanity experientially of just connecting and listening and understanding where it's coming from. And I do believe, if we're going to be generous, most people are honestly just trying to understand and connect with the divine in whatever way they can, whatever tools they have access to. And the more I've been open to that and just realized, if I could try to take on the perspective of God, like I could not imagine, this creation and sort of nitpicking and saying, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. You're not doing it the right way. And it's like, we can become so much more gracious in just that genuine pursuit of someone, a mother just praying or lighting some incense and doing some ceremony that I might, from my experience, think is very foreign and strange, but her heart is pure. Her heart is love. And so for me, it's like, it's, I think for you too, it's not just sort of this philosophical thing, but it's really just about these connections that we have and living in a much more peaceful way without having to nitpick at each other and tell each other this isn't the correct way. And we can find we can diffuse so much of this fear and anxiety and hostility that we make out of these differences, and instead sort of think, oh, that's a really interesting way that you're so different from what I have. And that's pretty cool. It's unique. I don't understand it, but wow, it's fascinating. And, God bless you. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but.
Yeah, no, I think as well, there was a time, especially during my late teens, where I delved deep into Islam. I would pray 5 times a day. I would do all the pillars, the traditions, everything. And I never regret it. It was definitely one of the most amazing periods of my life where I felt a lot of peace. And I felt like a belonging somewhere. I was in a club, as humans, we like to have an environment, a community, quite naturally. And it's like, how do I explain this? It's like, it's so easy to be, when you're in a community, to then suddenly impose on other people that what I believe is right. And I was definitely in that mindset too, and trying to prove other people wrong. I had many Catholic Christian friends, and it was like healthy, debates. Of course, we were challenging each other, but I was so set that this was the truth. But then when I kind of broke out of that mentality, I look back and I think, well, who was I to know exactly what was the truth when we are all essentially on the same level ground, level of the ground, and neither of us are supernaturally gifted or favoritized one over the other in the eyes of God. And so it made me realize we all have different opinions, we all have different belief systems. But like you said, when the intention is pure and it comes from a place of love, that is essentially the ultimate expression of God, within us and around us. And I think that's what made me realize, exploring other religions, is that open-mindedness as a logical way, but then it's that open-heartedness, which is the spiritual way.
Yeah.
And it's just connecting with that. And my relationships with people, not that they weren't great at all before, but I just energetically have felt that shift. Like, I understand you through your intentions, not necessarily through your outfit of actions, if I'm making sense.
Absolutely.
Of how you do things. It's from that root cause.
That's amazing. I'm amazed just at your articulation. You're a young woman, you're not, you're 20s. And is this something that you feel you have, I'm a middle-aged man, so I don't know exactly what the younger generation is talking about. Do you feel like this is, these kind of conversations are happening in this generation that you're part of? Or is this, do you feel like you're kind of leading a charge, or maybe just to picking up your own calling to kind of open up these dialogues?
I definitely have a few amazing friends in my life where I'm able to feel comfortable to have such conversations. And I'm very lucky to have that, because if it isn't for those conversations, then it wouldn't have propelled me to grow within the past few years, of course. So it wasn't all, just by myself reading off the internet and reading through books, although they did help.
Yeah.
But I think for my personal experience, and it's so within everyone's own perspective, but for me, it did feel like a calling. It did give me this vibe of feeling like the black sheep, feeling like no one else understood me. And it was so easy to victimize myself in a way, to feel so different. But then it was just snapping out of it and just thinking, no, I really believe this. I want to share it now. No more like feeling like no one gets me, or everyone's in their own like sector of religion and I'm just the free flowing spiritual, woman. And so I can have these conversations, even with my religious friends in their own sectors. And it's that mutual understanding, respect, and I owe it to them for my own growth as well. Yeah.
There's something I try to remind myself of. There's this kind of archetype of, I think it's called the sly man. Are you familiar with this?
No.
And I'm trying to do better at this of, because even as you well said, it's like, even as we kind of shift our own beliefs, we can almost adopt those as our new religion, right? And so then if I'm talking to somebody who, is still practicing the faith that I grew up in, there can be like this internal judgment of like, well, you haven't quite gotten to where I am yet. And instead, the sly man can kind of understand how to just be present within their world experience and affirming and speak that language as though you're one of them. And it's kind of interesting as I bring this up, there's a passage from Paul talking about, I became everything to everybody, basically kind of like adopting. It's not like faking it, it's like having the wisdom and the capacity to basically integrate yourself to whatever moment so that I'm not taking part in that separation and that distancing of absolutely. If I want to sit in and hang out with people of a particular worldview and belief, then I'm just there and I'm with them. I'm not trying to change them. I'm not trying to convince them that their worldview is limited or anything like that. And so having that ability and that wisdom as you explore all these things, or as I have too, of just like, okay, this is really cool. I can be, to the best of my capacity, I can be hang out with these Christian folk, or I can hang out with these New Age people, or I can hang out with these Hindu, and I'm just one with them. And I'm experiencing their reality and loving that reality. And I don't have to feel any impulsive need for making them anything other than what they are, and being in that spirit of love. There's probably a much better way that I can articulate that, but that was me working through it. But the sly man is something I definitely pops in my head whenever I notice myself in those situations of just like, hold on, just take on that character for this moment.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful way of seeing things. And I'm so amazed that you mentioned this, because this is something that I had been feeling lately. So at the beginning, when I was first learning traditional perennialism, my ego did slip at the beginning because it was adjusting to it. So when I did speak to friends that are Muslim, and I used to bond with them through an Islamic way of thinking, but then my thinking changed, and it was almost so easy for me to think they're not seeing it the way I do. They are limited, and this sense of like hierarchy. And it's not a great approach, but I am being honest. That's where the slip almost happened. And so it took a lot of, the more I was studying, the more I was trying to practice these teachings, the perennial teachings, into my own life, and just essentially presence and my spiritual journey. It became a lot less. And also just experiencing what you had just said. I have this little joke in my head that if a Christian was to ask me what religion I was, to them I'd be a Christian. If a Taoist was to ask me what religion I was, to them I'd be a Taoist, because I know how to connect with people, and it's just appreciating them in the moment, and also honoring my own beliefs too, because I resonate with so many different religions that it's like these labels, it shouldn't. Politically, they can exist for sure. I'll say to people, I'm a Muslim, and I am. But I think spiritually, labels, they can't exist as much as we try to. It's just so free flowing and harmonizing, and it's just wonderful. And whenever I speak to someone off a different background, I'm just so interested to learn, and I try my best not to come as like too eager because I'm learning for the sake of it. It's like, I'm genuinely interested.
Right.
Like, let me walk away from this conversation with something new to implement in my life,
Absolutely.
Take a piece of them with me, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. This happened for me, and I'm just kind of curious, because when I started to make a big shift away from even saying being comfortable. For a long time, I would say I'm a Christian, even though I was like very much, I'd say like I'm a Christian mystic or something like that. And I'd kind of play with the edges. And now it's just like I've started to not feel super comfortable with that, just because I know all the baggage that comes, kind of communicate. I feel like I'm communicating a certain association that doesn't feel comfortable to me. And so I know when it was actually, it's kind of its own spiritual moment, which is interesting. I don't know if you experienced something similar, but when it's like I had this spiritual experience, I felt it in my heart, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I believe something else now. And what does this mean? And I feel like the world changed very similarly to how even when I had very real experiences within the Christian services or ceremonies and things like that, prayers and all that throughout my whole life. It was really powerful. And so it was like, well, what do I do with those experiences? You know, those, I thought that was, you know, the truth of that reality. And now it's like, how do I make sense of that? And then the next thing was like, well, I had my spiritual practices that I would do on a daily basis. Now I don't know what to do. And I don't know if you had any of that moment for your life of like, wait, who am I praying to? What am I like, what's happening here? So did you have any of that for yourself?
Yes, it's so eerie how similar my experiences are to
Yeah.
yours. Um, so when I did used to pray 5 times a day, it was honestly so life-changing for me because the mindset, the character, the state of consciousness I was embodying that time was of a dedicated Muslim girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really feel my connection with God 5 times a day, you know, giving in my time, but time for myself, reflection and everything. And I did hit a point after studying through perennialism where the prayers were not connecting me to God anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have a lot of self-criticism, you know, is there something wrong with me? Like, because I was so rooted in a certain belief system. And there's nothing wrong with that, with staying in one. But as I evolved in my own path, my spiritual practices had to change. And it took a really long while for me to figure it out. And so I did try to implement meditation. I think that's quite common, being able to kind of shut out the world temporarily, redirect yourself to yourself with a capital S. And but then that still wasn't working for me in a routine. I needed something where I was able to integrate into my life. And this is where Taoism, I personally resonate with the most. A mix of Islam and Taoism for me personally. And a bit of Christianity, of course. But yes, Taoism and their belief and concept of time was revolutionary to me. I really liked how they integrate it with their daily lives, mindfulness, and this acceptance of the Tao. So a lot of the things that I have taught and plan to teach on my channel is presence. And we don't really get that focus in Abrahamic religions. It's more of a worship.
Yeah.
Whereas in Hinduism, Taoism, and Buddhism, there is a lot of focus on presence and time being eternal in the now. And so my spiritual practices have changed dramatically. And so far, you know, I've adjusted to it, and it's really been benefiting me. The exact same result as what I had with the Abrahamic way, but it's just a different language, a different fit, a different method, you know? So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you're on a daily basis, is meditation part of your current practice?
I do try to. I did have a recent lifestyle change because I started a job. And so that routine kind of knocked me out, just on a human materialistic physical level. But what I do practice as much as I can is just mindfulness throughout the day.
Yeah.
I do like to argue that itself is meditation. I see meditation as an external technique that's very powerful and helpful. But mindfulness is not just a technique, it's a way of living. It's a way of integrating the outputs and results of meditation just throughout your day. I find it easier. And going off on a little bit of a tangent, but there's just so much to feel in the present moment that I've noticed. It feels like eternity in the now. When I'm speaking to people, I'm giving them my full attention. I'm not thinking about the past and the future. And energetically, you feel a shift. And I think they pick it up too from what I've experienced. And it's just being in the present moment. And so that is my main focus. But then I do think meditation or some sort of other technique, external technique, is important to, and I like the word recalibrate your mind.
You're right. Yeah.
To kind of bring yourself back if I slip from not practicing mindfulness in particular. for a particular day. So yeah, it's still free flowing, but you change characters all the time within the space of 5 minutes, let alone throughout the day. So for me personally, routines are quite hard for me to adjust, but it depends on who you kind of not appear, but you be as a person. For some people, it's routines, it's discipline. And then for some, it's free flowing and acceptance. So yeah, a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
You didn't mention, because I'm curious to your perspective of, because you do, like I said, you do some of your videos in nature. And for me, getting out of the city was a big shift. And I knew this for a long time. I'd always try to get out to nature as much as I could, even while living in the city, but just being around that. So do you feel like that's, I don't know if easier is the right way, but right way to say it, but something about just having that presence and connection to nature kind of go hand in hand?
Absolutely. I think being in nature, when you realize that you're not necessarily surrounded by man-built inventions and landscapes and architecture, even though they are beautiful in their own rights, arguably depending on what your aesthetic is. But when you're surrounded by like a landscape that was not designed or built by man, automatically your spiritual self makes you think, well, who did? And then it's like presence of God is instantly there for you, and you're with it. And as well as the fresh air, you feel it in your breath work. It helps with your presence in the moment.
Absolutely.
You're connecting with it. And it's not even just the natural landscape. It's also the other ecosystems there, the animals, other sources of life through plants. It's so easy to be in our own little box, in a city life and think of all these man-made inventions and machines and technology. But then when you step outside to the countryside or a natural landscape, it's so much easier to detach from the materialism around us and actually connect with the divine within and around us. So I am an advocate for nature. But I do find it, in some of my nature videos, especially if I'm walking, I'm naturally in a meditative state. So it has been challenging for me to try not to ramble and waffle, the British term, because I'm so in tune. I feel like I'm part of the natural landscape that I forget, I'm actually doing a video. I need to articulate myself and be useful to people. And so it's quite easy to get lost in it too, but for the right reasons, I'd like to hope.
And I appreciate you didn't edit. It's very charming, actually. You're like, I think I'm lost. Where am I? What? There's a lake over there. Let me get back on track. What was I saying?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Just kind of that genuine presence that you have. Raisa, we're going to move into the last section of the podcast, which is Creative Confessions. And I really appreciate this conversation. But I guess if you could kind of sum up, what you hope to accomplish through the videos you're putting out into this calling that you have, or if you just kind of want to highlight something about the philosophy that you're diving into, love for you to just kind of share that. Or I guess that what I'm getting at is like, what is the kind of the mission or the hope that you have in expressing what you're sharing in your videos?
Yeah, so I think one of my driving goals in this lifetime is definitely to spread more awareness on traditional perennialism. It's such a niche philosophy that is so powerful, and yet not a lot of people know about it. It's a very niche, esoteric sector. And so that is one of my main motivating factors. But alongside with that, I think, especially with the current manifestation content, it's been so overcomplicated. It's been so, and I do critique, it's been modernized, so detached from God, union with God, our natural selves, that it's like I kind of understand why people have not been feeling peace within themselves. I had been one of them myself.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to tie traditional perennialism in with, traditional manifestation techniques of presence and help people actually feel peace within themselves to then be able to manifest their desires in union with God. And you know what? It's honestly that main focus of inner peace that I feel like we've all, had trouble with in this society and age. So hopefully my videos are doing
that is
that.
beautiful. And I love that so much because, I've done a lot of manifestation stuff. I've put out a few videos around that theme. And I too have experienced so much of that. And without getting too off the rails here, but I really appreciate that you're giving a counter to so much of what is out there that actually, in fact, can create so much more pain and distress when people are trying to pursue something that, is going to give them peace and security.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. So we're going to move into the last section here of the podcast, which is creative confessions. And I guess this is just sort of a fun way without, you don't have to get too revealing if that's uncomfortable, but this is where you share, a surprising story or confession about your creative journey that you've never shared publicly. Or if you don't want to do that, maybe just a forbidden idea of what you secretly want to do creatively or just in your life, but haven't done yet and maybe never will. Okay. So Reese, what is your creative confession?
I think I will share a little bit of a quick story. So I had a phase where I was learning to make music as a way of self-expression. It was during lockdown. And I essentially would make beats on SoundCloud. And it was just an exploration. I was listening to a different genre of music then. I was a different character, Raisa, then. But I did have this one beat that I was very proud of, and it kind of did well on SoundCloud. It is still on there, but I won't give the name out. It's too embarrassing. But I simultaneously, I'm proud of it. And it was a tune that during the middle of the day, I had a nap, and it was a part of my life where I was going through a lot. And in that dream, within that nap, I had a dream that I was making this tune. And I woke up remembering that tune.
Wow. Okay.
And then I just went straight to the MIDI keyboard, straight to my computer, FL Studio, expressed myself through it. It felt very spiritual. And when I made it, it was like all my friends loved it. It was one of my favorite beats I made, and different genre. I don't listen to R&B and hip hop anymore. But yeah, back then I did. And yeah, I confess that.
That's amazing. That's a great confession, and amazing because I've had moments too when I wait, or middle of the night, I'll have a song or something in my head, and you have to do what you just did. You have to go straight to it. Otherwise it's gone forever. I've done that. It's like 3 a.m. I'm like, I'll remember this in the morning. No, it's gone. No. So yeah, take captive of that. I think that's the collective unconscious speaking to you and using you. But yeah, you just have to be willing and open to go jump on that immediately. So
intuition is key to so many things, but that comes with presence.
Absolutely. That's amazing. All right, so we're going to share your beat on the Instagram and the YouTube channel and everything. No, we won't dare do that to you. Risa, this is amazing conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. And for those who are not yet familiar, I will absolutely put a link to your website in the show notes. But is there anything else that you want people to know how to follow you and be more familiar with you and connect more of the things that you're putting out to the world?
Just my YouTube channel is where you can find me. I do offer mentoring sessions for those that need guidance or just a way to connect. I do like to keep my personal life private, so not open to sharing the Instagram yet, but I'm still exploring. But no, that's where you'll find me. Yeah.
Wonderful. I highly recommend it. For me, because I actually I can't remember how long it was, but yeah, I was reading Perennial Philosophy by Huxley, and I actually had a really hard time with it. So I think your doing necessary, helpful work because you're, re-articulating it, and you do such an excellent job at that. So I
Thank
highly
you.
recommend people check out the channel, check out some of the videos, really wonderful insights, profound insights. So keep it coming. And I appreciate everyone else for joining us on this episode of the Art and Void podcast. And hope you found some inspiration and insights from the conversation that will help you and inspire you on your artistic endeavors. Remember that the void is not an emptiness to be feared, but a space of infinite possibilities waiting to be explored.